Mhm. Yeah, that's negotiation, right?
Hmm?
That's negotiation. That's saying you want this, and I'm saying that yeah, maybe not, right? Because some things are certain and some things are uncertain. So as far as I can promise, I promise. Beyond that, and there's like, well, what could possibly? I don't know. Volcanoes, earthquakes, tsunamis, uh, you know, death of my pet tiger. I don't know whatever thing um, is happening. So so it's yeah. I think it's okay to make promises with conditions, and I think conditions are relevant uh, at, at almost any point in time. There's a few examples where um, conditions can be complex, but deal breakers are everywhere. I think that there's always something that can happen which can break the deal. And
Mm-hmm.
if you look very carefully at contracts, any lawyer will tell you that all contracts are written so that there is a way out. All contracts are written so see people think contracts are written to bind you into something. No, contracts are written for the opposite reason, to let you out if it all goes as we say pear-shaped, right? Because a pear is a funny shape, and so so if everything goes pear-shaped, like horribly wrong, then the contract exists so that you can say, you didn't fulfill this, therefore the contract is no longer valid. Um, so
Mm-hmm.
this idea that, oh, I've got a contract and I have to fulfill it. No, the contract's there just to make sure you can get out, not so that you're trapped in. Yeah, which is what people don't understand about the principle of contracts, where we have got this big debate about Britain and the European Union. It's like, well, Britain entered into this. Yes, but
3 years. Mm-hmm.
yeah.
It's been on 3 years. Mm-hmm.
So
If not long.
so the only contract that you can't break is a contract with the devil. Yeah, it's the only contract you can't break because hell is an eternity, right?
Some people do not believe in it.
Mm, I can see. I can understand that, but the problem is that belief is different from that which we can prove. So even no belief is still a belief. That's why people, atheism is still in essence a religion because it's a belief that nothing exists.
Mm-hmm.
It's still a belief. You believe in something, you believe in nothing. It doesn't change the fact that it's a belief. So there's no basic difference between believing there is a God and believing there isn't a God because it's still a belief. Yeah, and from a scientific perspective, the there has to be the burden of proof of evidence that something exists, otherwise it doesn't, and so that's science. But at the end of the day, people are quite irrational in their beliefs because they don't change them because we we buy into what we know, and what we know is less than what it actually exists. So we vote for one political party because we know a little bit about them, but there's a lot of things we don't know about the other political parties, which could be even be better. So the people just don't take the time to study because they, at the end of the day, if they do take the time to study, they end up realizing it's all the same anyway, and and
Mm-hmm.
and and what's the point? Because the contradiction is the more you study something, the more you learn about something, the more contradictory it becomes. Yeah, everybody who seems perfect at first um, just is better at hiding the negatives that they have within their character. So we're all flawed as human beings, and in essence, what makes a lot of successful people successful is their ability to take their flaws and their negative side and say, look, this is me, and do something like this is the 8 Mile film with Eminem, where at the end that there's this rap battle between Eminem's character and the other character, and the whole principle of the rap is to degrade and put down the other person and say negative things about the other person, but Eminem steals the power from the other rapper by putting himself down so that the other rapper
Mhm.
has no content.
Mhm.
And so if you're able to, it's like no one can hurt you if no one can really hurt you if everyone knows what hurts. Because be, yeah, it's just the way that it is, because any real person's going to turn around and go, why are you hurting them when you know that it hurts?
Mhm. Yeah, and
Right?
sometimes people are hurting without knowing they are hurting.
Oh, yeah,
Mhm.
that's anger, resentment, pride, foolishness, lack of education. Um, yeah, that's that's most of society. That's voting for somebody else to solve all your problems, right? I mean, that's just an expression of um, hurt, because we have to solve our own problems for ourselves, right? So the idea that some political party is going to come in and make decisions that are going to solve everybody's problems. The truth is that nobody knows what's right for everybody. If someone's an alcoholic and they go to Alcoholics Anonymous, the group that should help them, and they say, I need help because I'm an alcoholic, and they say, well, you're an adult, you need to take care of yourself, right? Then
Mhm.
that's wrong, right? Because the person's asking for help. See, when somebody comes and asks for help, it's different when you don't know if a person wants advice or doesn't want advice. But when
Mhm.
a person comes to you asking for advice, that's the student seeking the master, right? And when the student
Uh-huh.
seeks the master is obligated to provide some kind of guidance. Yeah. When the master is seeking the student, um, then that's a different kind of situation.
Mhm.
So this is the contradiction, right? In one scenario, it's perfectly okay to say you are your own person, you must make your own decision. But in another scenario, it's not.
Mhm.
And it's understanding which is which. It's understanding the differences. Yeah. So, and it's understanding responsibility. When child goes to parent and asks parent for advice, and parent doesn't give advice, parenting failure. Parenting failure. Because that's the
Mhm.
parent, one of the parent's few jobs, few specific tasks, is to provide clear advice, or to give direction, or to, I would say, encourage some kind of philosophical thought about the situation, or would be even better, relate their own experience. Well, let me tell you what happened to me when I did this. I did this, and I thought that this was good or bad, and the result was this or that or whatever. So um, the sharing of experience, because what you're basically saying to your parents is, I don't want to make the same mistakes that you made. And your parents are basically saying to you, fuck you, it's going to happen anyway. And you're like, no, I want to be different, I want to be better. And they're like, screw you, you're going to be just like us.
Yes. Exactly.
Makes sense, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, yeah,
Totally.
yeah. And then you're like, it feels like a circle, because it is, because they're not letting you out of the circle. right?
Mhm.
Because what they're doing is they're basically washing their hands of all responsibility, saying, well, you're your own person now, but you're never your own person if your parents are still alive. You're never, you're never, you're never your own person if your
Mhm.
parents are still alive, because 50 at least 50% of all people spend most of their time managing what their parents have failed to manage. Yeah, at least half of people. Here, here's the thing. You have to give something. Give value. Don't
Mhm.
give valuables. Money is a
Okay.
valuable. Don't give valuables. Give value. Right.
Mhm.
Um, especially at the beginning. Right. Imagine you are. Here's a great example. Imagine there's a card game, like a professional card game, like a professional poker game, right? And they say, okay, you have to buy in to the game. You have to like put down $100 if you want to play, right? Or $1,000 if you want to play. You don't come to the table and put down $100 or $1,000 at the beginning and play when you don't know anything, right? You don't. You don't buy
Mhm.
it. You don't buy in when you don't know what you're buying into. But
Mhm.
what you can bring is value, and value is enthusiasm, time, energy, knowledge, experience, virtue, kindness, love, friendship, um, care, interest. I mean, that's like if I'd rather have that than an extra £100 in my bank account, right?
Mhm.
I'd rather have that because that's what real value is. Because once the money is burned, you're not going to have anything if you weren't a nice person, right? So, and in the in the financial area, what the problem there is the buying of things. Yeah,
Mhm.
because the more you have to buy, the more you have. Nothing wrong with having things, right? There's nothing wrong with having things, but on the other side, the more you have, the more you have to invest to protect what you have.
I know.
So
Mhm.
so you got the nice car, but you got to invest in the alarm system for the nice car. You got the nice big house, but you got to have big walls and cameras and everything else around about it. And there's nothing wrong with protecting what you have. There's nothing wrong with having some level of privacy. Nothing wrong with any of that. Um, but I think that the rewards, if the rewards come, they come later, not earlier. If people want the rewards now. If the rewards come, the rewards come later, not earlier. The Christians have got it right when it's like the rewards don't come while you're alive during your lifetime. They don't. You don't get rewarded on earth. You get rewarded in heaven.
Mhm.
So if you are a true Christian, in essence, you're not waiting for anything, right? You're not expecting anything. You're not living in expectation that you're going to get something anyway, right? You don't feel entitled to anything because if there is some entitlement, it will be judged fairly and squarely by someone else, somewhere else, at some other time. And so the you you can make money working with money. People do that a lot, and yet at the same time, we all really understand that that's not what everything is about. Because I think if you're bringing value to people, and this is a
Mhm.
personal philosophy, so it might not work for everybody. I think if you're bringing value to people, that's as valuable as something material. Yeah. And it's just my experience that we all have experience, and we all have something to give and something to offer. And I think that a lot of the time money gets in the way of it, where it, people often get confused that they think that the values the values in the money, but it's not, because the money comes and goes so quickly. The more you have, the more you spend. Nothing wrong with having extra money to spend. Nothing wrong with that. It's just that we have to realize that's the way that it works. Yeah, and like every one of the richest people in history has ended up with the same problem. Apart from the fact they all die eventually, they've ended up with the same problem, which is how do I give all this away?
Mhm.
And they always end up unable to do it, because it just creates so many problems. So you notice how rich people live in big houses with empty rooms that no one ever uses. I mean,
Yeah.
it's got to be much better to be in a smaller place, right, with things that you use, rather than a bigger place with things that you don't use. Yes, it's nice to have a tennis court, but when you use it, when you don't have the time to use it, yeah, right, then
Mhm.
it's probably much better to join a club and use their tennis court than have your own, right? Because that'll give you a nice social activity as well, and you won't feel isolated, because the downside of what we view as success in the modern world is that people become isolated as a result of it. Yeah, almost every single person that the media presents as successful is just isolated, and that's not success.
Mm.
It's just not. It's just not. So it's
I'm just looking for some way how to you know look after myself because
uh, be careful not to live in expectation.
mhm.
That will trap you. You see, the simple truth is that there's no reason why you couldn't already have started a yoga school for kids,
Mhm.
except that you expect things to be a certain way. When you get outside of that principle of expectation, then you realize life's just what you get as you go down the road, right? You could set up a school and it'd be a great success. You could set up a school and it'd be a great failure. Um, Either way, it might or might not be your fault. It's the doing things that that
Mhm.
that matters. Thoughts are nothing without execution. Thoughts are nothing without execution. They don't mean anything. All the thoughts you know you, there's a very old saying that the richest place in the world is the graveyard,
Mhm.
right? So yeah, well, the thoughts are nothing without execution. This idea that uh, when you when you bring tomorrow into today, things change. When you leave tomorrow in tomorrow, it stays the same. What does that mean? Bring it forward.
Mhm.
Bring it forward, right? And yes, things take time. We understand that, but um, the I contradiction of time and experience. It's easier to change things when you're younger than it is when you're older, but you don't have the experience. But you only have the experience when you're older and not when you're younger, and you don't know. But fuck it, you have to make mistakes anyway. So um, if I had more, I would do more is bullshit.
Mhm.
It is. If I had more, I would do more is nonsense. People who have more don't do more. They just do the same. Because just because that's the way that it works. Because the problem is not the problem is not you need more. The problem is you need scale. And
Mhm.
and people think they need more. Okay, let's take an example. Like let's say let's take your your income, right? Let's say how much money you make in a month, right? Scale is understanding that it doesn't matter if you make 1,000, 10,000, or 100,000. It doesn't matter. What matters is that the percentages that you spend on each thing that's important to you remain the same. The percentage you spend on where you live, the percentage you spend on food, the percentage you spend on health, the percentage you spend on recreation, the percentage you spend on friends, the percentage you spend on family, the percentage you spend on travel. That percentage must remain the same. It doesn't matter how much money you make. And if you live within a scale of percentages, you should be within the borders of not having too little and not having too much.
Mm-hmm.
If you live within a scalable income, and this means if you make 10,000, your percentages remain the same. And as long as your percentages remain the same, your life is scalable and you can live on any scale. You can live with nothing, you can live with everything. Well, the problem comes when we don't have scalable systems and scalable income, because then the levels change all the time. And we think because we have more, we can spend more on certain things, but we can't really spend more. We only ever spend the same because it's a percentage.
Mm-hmm.
It's not
Percentage.
more. It's not more. It's part of a scale. Think about it like you have 10 people and you have a pie, right?
Yes.
It doesn't matter how big the pie is, you still have to cut it up for 10 people the same way, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so um, the 10 people are the elements that are important in your life, and the pie is the resources that you have to give to those areas. Maybe you want to give some people a bigger piece of cake and some people a smaller piece of cake or pie or whatever it is that you have. So it's scale, and when we understand scale, we realize that when people say, "If I had more, I would give more," this is not true. You really wouldn't, because you always give the same.
Same. Mm-hmm. Okay.
If if you're if you're with a person that you love, whether you have 5 minutes with them or 5 hours with them, you give the same, right? You don't give more because you have more time. It remains the same because it's constant. It's a scale. Like let's say because that's manageable. Because if you give 1% of your income to charity, that's scalable. If you try to give the same amount of money each year to charity, that's not scalable.
Mm.
Because sometimes you will have more and sometimes you will have less. But as long as it's in the scale, you're fine. Because you're not
Yeah.
really, when you have more, you're not really giving more. You're giving the same percentage. When you get
Wow.
your income, I,
Mm-hmm.
when you get your income, you cut it in
Mm-hmm.
half. You take
Oh,
half and put it
yes.
away, and you take the 50%, and then you scale the 50% for what you need in your life.
Wow.
And then what happens is every month you are basically doubling your income even though you don't realize it. And that if you live for 6 months like that, you can live for 6 months without working.
Mm-hmm.
And that is your freedom.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. Just like how do I get free? Cut it in half and scale.
Go on.
But but it
That
works.
is a lot.
It
Mm-hmm.
works.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because because people get trapped into a lifestyle. You get trapped in a lifestyle. And the lifestyle is for a lot of people essentially based on their income, which is a mistake, right? Um, because you've got to have, uh, it's good to have a reserve or a resource, yeah, that in case of issues or situations. Now, you can, and here's the thing to understand, right? Here's the thing to understand. When you think about how much you're going to get paid for your job,
Mhm.
and you realize that you're really only going to get half of that, because you need to put the other half aside, then you realize that most people realize they're not quite paid as much as they need to be paid.
Mhm.
Because really to understand how much you're really paid for the job that you do, you take the whole number and you cut it in half, and you say this is what I'm really paid, because the other half is just security. Half is what I'm paid that I can spend, and the other half is security. So I really only have half of it. Oh my God, I can't live with that. Well, actually you can to a certain extent, because instead of having 2 beers, you can have one, right? Instead of buying um, the I don't know, instead of buying I don't know, whatever you could, most
Yeah, they get things
most people can
smaller.
still live a healthy lifestyle by cutting things. Fuck, you can live on tomatoes and water, right? But I'm not saying someone should do that, but what I'm saying is that the water is the water and tomatoes are cheaper than the beef bourguignon and the cabernet sauvignon, right?
Mhm.
Um, so look, here's the example to understand. Just stand anywhere, look around, you will see people burning money. Just stand anywhere, look
True.
around, you'll see people burning money. And it's nice to buy the ice cream. It's nice to have the ice cream. You can also realize at the same time you don't need the ice cream, but that's okay. That, and it's actually more sensible to not buy the ice cream if you know that's putting 50% away
Mhm.
than it is to not buy the ice cream and not put 50% away. If you know what I mean. So, see,
Mhm.
less can be more
More.
if it's organized and orientated in the right way. It's the contradiction. Like less can be more. Less in one area can mean more in another. Um, it's the, scalable lifestyles. Look, very often rich people and poor people both live sustainable, happy lifestyles because they're living within scale, not because the rich person has more. The, the, the person who has more ends up having to spend more to keep the more that they have. That's okay. It's just understanding that's the way it works.
Mhm.
It's just understanding that. And the, the the basics of economics should be taught by uh, parents to their children. It's very often not. The money has a money has a curious value that people don't really understand. That money money is just a way of exchanging values between people, but it doesn't mean anything if people don't have values. So uh, it's some people need the newest of the new, and that's okay, and that drives some elements of economy. That's fine. Some people don't. We're pretty lucky in the modern world that I always come back to this. It's like I don't think that there are very few people in the modern world that are going to completely starve, right? And in fact,
Mhm.
we have here's the contradiction. We have more poor people in Britain percentage-wise than we've ever had, but we have more obesity than we've ever had. So what does that tell you? I said the people are not poor in their pocket, they're poor in their mind.
Mm-hmm.
Poverty is a mindset. It's a way of thinking. Yeah, I'm thinking I'm poor. Well, look, if you've got clothes to wear and you can feel the sun on your skin and you've got your health, relatively speaking, then like poverty is being poor is essentially a mindset because that's what makes you ill. You know, that's what the the person is on the street because they drank alcohol too much, right? And or they took drugs, but they're not on the street because they drank alcohol or took drugs. They're on the street because they made the wrong choices.
Mm-hmm.
It's a mindset. It's a way of thinking.